Okay, hi guys. I'm going to go over how to use loops. So in the last video, I talked about using if statements, which are one of the control structures that are pretty essential to most programs. Now we're going to cover loops, which is the other thing. Now the basic idea behind a loop is essentially you're going to repeat a section of code a whole bunch of times to save you from writing it out. So the idea being, let's say you wanted to, let's say we're going to dim a variable called x as integer, right? Now let's say you want to print out every number from 1 to 10, right? You could say console.writeLine x. I should give this a value, so I'll say this equals 0. And then you could say x plus equals 1, which means just add 1 onto what x currently is. And we can write a line again, printing out x. And we can repeat this process a whole bunch of times, right? So we could copy this and paste it. And paste it a whole bunch of times, essentially, is what you could do. Right? And essentially, this will print out, this probably isn't 10, but you'll see that it will print out sort of, it looks like 0 to about 7. Right? And the problem with doing things this way is that, firstly, it's a lot of code. You can see I've used 20 lines for something that shouldn't take that long. But then the better question is, well, what happens if I want to count from 0 to 100 or 1,000 or a million? I shouldn't have to write out that many lines of code. I mean, if you look back at the program, it's like every time I want to add 1 and print it out is 2 lines of code. So if I was going to do count to 1,000, for example, right, then I would have to write out essentially 2,000 lines of code to do it this way. This is not good. So let's get rid of this. What we're going to do instead is we're going to loop this code here so it repeats as many times as we want, right? So to do that, we're going to use the most basic one is a while loop. So while this condition happens, we keep doing the loop. So I'm going to say while x is less than or equal to 10, right? And now I've got this end while, which is generated by the by VB. So everything that you want to repeat has to go in between this while and this end while. So while the value of x is less than or equal to 10, I want you to write out what it is and then add 1 to it. Right. So essentially, if you're just running this as like a desk check, you'd be like, okay, x starts as 0, it's less than 10, so I write out 0 and plus 1. Now the x is 1. Is 1 less than 10? Well, yes, it is. So I write out 1 and then I add 1 on, so it's 2. Is 2 less than 10? And so on until you get to 10, where 10 is equal to 10 or less than or equal to 10. So you print 10 plus 1 to be 11. And then the next time this tries to loop around, it'll say, well, 11 is actually bigger than 10. So this no longer is satisfied, which means I skip down from line 6 to line 10, and I continue on with the program from here. Right? So now if I run this, you will see that it will count through those 10 digits for me, those 10 numbers for me, right? Which is handy. That's what loops do. And you can see that obviously that's saving me a bit of time. Obviously I can just slap a 0 in here, and it's much quicker to use these 4 lines of code, print out 100 numbers rather than use 200 lines of code to do it the other way, right? So that's good. That's how you iterate through something. Now, it doesn't always have to be with numbers. A good example would be something like, let's say, if you prompted a user to do something. Let's say I'm going to make a boolean, just because I like using booleans. In choice as boolean. Right? We'll say this equal to true. Let's change this up a bit. Let's pretend we're making a game or something like that. We have the line console.writeLine then maybe I'll have in brackets P will pick up D for destroy. Right? So it's prompting the user to enter the letter P if I should pick up the diamond, or D to destroy it. Right? You could then have a loop here if you wanted to. It says, well, choice is equal to, that's going to make more sense if I make this false. That's just me being pedantic, so don't worry. So while choice is equal to false, meaning they haven't made a choice, we're going to repeat this code here. So I'm going to say console.readline, which is how I read in input, remember? Oh yeah, put anything in there. I'm going to need some sort of variable for a response as well. And best as string. So this is just going to store the answer to this question. Right. So it's going to ask them, should I pick it up or should I destroy it? It's going to read in their answer. I'm going to say if resp equals P or resp equals D. Right. Then we'll make choice equal true. And else we're going to print out P or pickup or D destroy. Right. So essentially this is forcing them to make a decision. And if they don't type in the right response, it's just going to keep repeating. Although I haven't done that well. We'll see why I haven't done that well in a second. Because it never actually prompts them. Does it? Oh, it does prompt them. Oh, that's okay then. Alright. So we're in our game. Should we pick up the diamond or destroy it? P for pick up, D for destroy. Let's say I type in D because I'm dumb. There's enter P for pick up or D for destroy. D for pick up, D for destroy, D. Right? And then finally, so essentially it's making them choose the correct input. So that's one way that you can use a loop as well. So we've looked at using a loop to count, and we've looked at using a loop to in another way to, well, there's lots of ways you can do it, right, essentially. But essentially what this code is now saying is that only once they've made the correct choice do we change this condition that the whole loop is dependent on. So I don't know, hopefully you found that interesting. That's the basic idea of how while loops work. Now, we also have for loops, which tend to be used for counting or going through a list. So I'll do an example of that when I get up to lists. But you can say, for example, for, we'll just say the letter X. Let's get rid of this one, just to avoid confusion. For X equals 0 to 20, right? And this language here takes a little bit of getting used to. But I'll just write out each section of the loop so you can see what it does, right? So essentially, this loop here says we're going to loop through the value of x equals 0 all the way to the value of x equals 20. All right, and we're going to count up by 1 in between there, unless otherwise stated we're going to count up by 1. So the first thing it's going to do, it's going to write out 0, and then it's going to go to the next x value, which will be x equals 1, and it'll write out the 1, the next value, x equals 2, and so on. So you'll see that this will be, and I've got my other program above it, so I'm just going to D for destroy, see how it's counted through each of those values there. That's basically how that works. So it's in a very similar sort of setup to the while. I get into the habit of using more while loops than for loops, just because I think it's easier to control the condition, but it's up to you which one you prefer to use. They're both useful in their own way. But yeah, you can have a list work really well with a for loop. So that's basically all I want to talk about. I want to try and keep these sort of short and sweet. So I hope you enjoyed that. Take it easy.